My new favorite setup for foilboarding is foiling with a large wing and a small kite. Given the advantages of foil kites in light wind, I've been using my 8-meter sole quite a bit recently, paired with this large wing, and I've really been enjoying it. Recently, this single skin 8-meter Peak 4 was sent to us to demo. At first, I was a little bit apprehensive to try it. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot to this kite. But that being said, we've heard a lot of positive reviews about it, specifically for foilboarding, so I was eager to give it a shot. We decided to compare it to a foil kite and an LEI kite of similar sizes to see how it compares for light wind foilboarding. Full disclosure, we are Flysurfer ambassadors, which is why we're using all Flysurfer kites here. That being said, these are 3 different types of kite designs. So we've got the single skin, foil, and LEI kites. So hopefully this review will provide insight on these 3 different types of kites, regardless of the brand. Let's get started. Because the Peak is a single skin kite, it is extremely light. The reduced weight means that it can fly in very light winds while still generating enough power to ride. I was able to get up and foiling on Peak 4 in 8 knots. I was pretty surprised that it could deliver that much power in such light wind. During my sessions, not once did it lose shape or collapse on me. The stability was impressive. I was also able to get going on the sole in 8 knots as well. Of course, it's important to mention that of the 3 kites I was comparing, this is the one that I have the most experience flying. Switching from the Peak to the sole, I could definitely feel the difference in weight between the 2 kites, with the sole feeling heavier but significantly more powerful. For the Stoke 7, I needed much more wind, 12 knots just to get going. I had 2 incidents where the kite fell from the sky during lulls. I did attempt to get going on the Stoke in 10 knots, and even looping it multiple times, I could not get enough power to get foiling. Unlike the Peak or the sole, the Stoke required constant flying in light wind. Of the 3 kites, the Stoke felt the heaviest in the sky, with the least amount of power. I flew the Stoke in up to 14 knots while foiling, but definitely felt like it could handle more, and found, not surprisingly, that it did really shine in stronger wind. Now you may be wondering, why are we using a 7-meter LEI and not an 8-meter LEI? Well, this is just what we own, so this is what we're using. Ideally, it would have been great to have an 8-meter, and it's safe to assume an 8-meter would have more power, but it would also weigh more as well. The Peak 4 is different from any kite that I've ever flown because it flutters. It's pretty noticeable too, both in terms of the noise and the feel. Some riders may find this to be annoying. It took a session or 2 for me to get used to that. When you sheath in the bar enough, it does kill most of the flapping, but even still, it's a very different feel than a foil or LEI kite. So why does this happen? When the kite is depowered, there's no support in the structure, so the trailing edge flaps. The reason for the flapping is the lack of rigidity in the kite when it's depowered. At least that's my understanding. The Peak is an agile kite, making it a playful kite for foiling. It has super tight turns and pulls through the turns nicely. The depower is very direct. When you are depowered or the bar is sheeted out, you do get substantially more feedback or shaking, which you do feel directly through the bar. It does fly deeper in the wind window, and it does drift nicely as well. In comparison, the sole handles very smoothly. In light winds, it comfortably parks at 12 with no problem. The 8-meter in particular is quick to respond, flies fast and predictably. In general, I would define the turning speed as fast, but of the 3 kites compared, it was the slowest, which isn't surprising given the aspect ratio of the kite. Not surprisingly, the sole also provided the most lift, which is helpful for me at the moment as I'm practicing foot switches. The depower of the sole is more linear in comparison to the Peak, and you don't get any of the feedback you do with the Peak when you depower. The Stoke also handles well. However, as I mentioned before, in marginal wind, it does require active flying. It likes to be flown deeper in the wind window and very actively in super light winds. The Stoke is a freestyle/wave kite, so not only is it very responsive, it turns quickly too, much faster than what I'm used to with the sole. I had a lot of fun with down loops on both the Stoke and the Peak for this reason. On the Peak, I only dropped the kite into the water once, and managed to quickly relaunch with no issue. I would consider myself lucky, as the Peak is not designed for water use and relaunch can be iffy. Kite Junkie has a video, linked in the description below, where he relaunched the Peak 69 out of 70 times. Speaking with local foilboarders who have flown the Peak much more extensively than me, their experience is about a 50% relaunch rate. On the other hand, I've relaunched the sole many times. Many times. It requires knowledge of how to relaunch a foil kite. However, of the foil kites I've tried, the sole is by far the easiest to relaunch, as oftentimes you just simply need to pull a steering line. In light winds, it can require some patience, especially if water gets in and you need to drain the kite a bit. The Stoke relaunches as easily as any LEI kite that I've ever flown. That being said, given the weight of the kite, I wouldn't be overly confident in relaunching it in very marginal conditions. So during my comparison sessions, luckily I did not have to self-rescue with any of the kites. That being said, I probably have the most self-rescue experience with the Fly Surfer Soul, and I would imagine that's probably the most difficult of the 3 types of kites to self-rescue with, as the kite can take on water. I believe that the Peak would probably be pretty straightforward self-rescue situation, as the kite would probably wrap up quite nicely and compactly, so it would make it pretty easy to swim with. And then obviously for the LEI, the kite stays inflated, you don't have to worry about it taking on water, and it floats as well, which helps for swimming back to shore. If you've had to self-rescue with the Peak, let us know how it went in the comments below.
Of these kites, the foil kite is the most expensive, followed by the LEI, and then the single skin, which isn't surprising given the labor and materials that go into each type of kite. When it comes to comfort and ease of use, my favorite kite is the foil kite. Chalk it up to familiarity, but the Soul delivers a nice riding experience, even in the crappiest of winds. With enough wind, the LEI also delivers. It's a fun kite to fly, and practicing down loops and transitions on the foil board was an enjoyable experience. The only downfall, in my opinion, is just needing a little bit more wind to get going. The Peak, while a fun kite, isn't what I would describe as a comfortable ride, at least at first. It's lively, it's fun, it's challenging. But I could see how the fluttering may be potentially off-putting to other riders who would prefer the smooth stability of a foil kite or the responsiveness without the fluttering that an LEI can provide.
Mentioned earlier, the Peak 4 is not actually designed for water. It's an adventure kite, and it's meant for touring and exploring for both snow kiting and land boarding. The fact that you can foil with it is a nice bonus though. While we haven't tried the Peak 4 for snow kiting yet, we'd imagine it'd be a great kite for that. Also, because there's so much less material, it packs down very compactly into this tiny little bag here, which makes traveling a breeze.
In my view, the real benefit of this kite is just how lightweight it is. It keeps it flying in the sky when there's really no wind at all, or during lulls, and it doesn't fall from the sky. In conclusion, I was pleasantly surprised by the Peak. I thoroughly enjoyed my foil sessions on it and had a lot of fun in marginal conditions. It's easy to keep the kite in the air in light wind, and that's where the single skin kite really shines in comparison to the other 2, where at times I was really trying to keep those kites in the air. I didn't experience that with the Peak. It pulls, it turns quickly, and it's responsive. All great things for foilboarding. That being said, I would imagine the fluttering can be off-putting for some riders who may prefer the smooth ride of a foil or an LEI kite. While I still prefer foiling with my 8-meter Soul, I can't say I didn't enjoy foiling with an LEI. The quick loops and fast flying of the Stoke was a lot of fun for me on the foil board. I had to work much more to keep foiling in marginal conditions, which in itself makes for a more engaging session. The downfall was that I needed more wind to get going on my 7-meter.
Alright, so that's my take. Let us know what type of kite you prefer for foilboarding in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!